3 years ago, I walked into TechFlow Solutions as employee number 7. Today I'm about to bring down $1 billion company with a single phone call. My name is Liza Chen, and this is the story of how I went from trusted engineer to corporate enemy number 1. All because I refused to let them steal what was rightfully mine. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning I first stepped into TechFlow Solutions in downtown Seattle, I had no idea I was walking into what would become the most defining chapter of my life. It was March 15, 2021, and the company occupied the entire 15th floor of the Meridian Tower. The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the air. They'd just moved from their cramped startup space in South Lake Union. Marcus Blackwood, the CEO and founder, greeted me personally that first day. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with the kind of confident handshake that suggested he'd never doubted himself a day in his life. His corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Elliott Bay, and I remember thinking how surreal it felt to be there. "Liza, welcome to the family," he said, gesturing toward the bustling open workspace beyond his office. "I've been following your work since your days at Microsoft, that algorithm you developed for predictive data compression. Revolutionary stuff." I'd left Microsoft after 6 years, burned out from the corporate bureaucracy and endless meetings that seemed to accomplish nothing. TechFlow was different, or at least it promised to be. Marcus had founded the company with a vision of creating software that could streamline business operations for mid-sized companies, something that the big players like Salesforce and Oracle were too bloated to do effectively. "We're not trying to be everything to everyone," Marcus explained as he walked me through the office. "We're trying to be the perfect solution for companies that are growing fast but don't have enterprise-level budgets." The team was small but impressive. Sarah Martinez, the head of product development, had been at Google for 8 years before joining TechFlow. Jake Thompson, our lead developer, was a coding prodigy who dropped out of Stanford to work at a series of successful startups. Emma Rodriguez handled marketing and customer relations with an energy that was infectious. David Kim managed operations with the precision of someone who'd actually read every business book ever written. But it was the technology that really excited me. TechFlow's core platform was built around what Marcus called adaptive workflow intelligence, software that could learn a company's specific processes and optimize them in real time. It was ambitious, almost to the point of being impossible. Almost. My first project was to develop the mathematical foundation for this adaptive system. Marcus wanted something that could analyze vast amounts of operational data and identify patterns that humans might miss. More importantly, he wanted it to predict problems before they happened and suggest solutions automatically. I spent the first month just absorbing everything: the existing codebase, the customer feedback, the technical challenges that had stumped previous attempts at similar systems. The more I learned, the more I realized that what Marcus was asking for wasn't just difficult. It was a fundamental breakthrough in how software could interact with business processes. Late one evening in April, I was working alone in the office when the solution hit me. Not just an idea, the entire mathematical framework, complete and elegant, like a symphony that had been waiting for someone to hear it. I spent the next 3 days barely sleeping, coding furiously, testing and refining what would become the Adaptive Process Intelligence System, or APIs. The breakthrough came when I realized that traditional approaches were trying to force business processes into rigid mathematical models. Instead, APIs would create dynamic models that evolved with the data, using a combination of machine learning, predictive analytics, and what I called contextual pattern recognition. The system could learn not just what happened, but why it happened, and what was likely to happen next. When I demonstrated the first working prototype to Marcus, his reaction was everything I'd hoped for. He stared at the screen for a full minute, watching as APIs analyzed a sample dataset from a fictional company, and not only identified inefficiencies, but suggested specific workflow modifications that would improve productivity by an estimated 37%. "Liza," he said finally, "this is going to change everything." He was right, but not in the way either of us expected. The next 6 months were a blur of development, testing, and refinement. APIs became the heart of TechFlow's platform, and the results were extraordinary. Our first major client, a logistics company called Northwest Freight, saw a 42% improvement in operational efficiency within the first quarter of implementation. Word spread quickly through the industry. By October 2021, We had 15 clients and a waiting list of companies desperate to implement our system. Marcus was fielding calls from venture capital firms offering funding rounds that would value TechFlow at over $50 million. The trade publications were calling APIs the future of business intelligence. But success brought unexpected challenges. As the company grew rapidly, the dynamics began to shift. Marcus hired a chief technology officer, Bradley Peterson, who immediately began questioning every technical decision I'd made. New engineers were brought in who seemed more interested in rewriting my code than understanding how it worked. "We need to scale this system," Bradley announced during a team meeting in November. "The current architecture might work for 15 clients, but what happens when we have 100, 1,000? I tried to explain that APIs had been designed with scalability in mind, that the mathematical framework was inherently modular and could handle exponential growth without fundamental changes. But Bradley had the title and the MBA, and Marcus seemed to trust his judgment over mine. The real turning point came during our Christmas party. TechFlow had rented out a rooftop venue in Belltown, and for the first time since joining the company, I felt like we were truly celebrating something significant. The platform was performing beyond our wildest projections, client satisfaction was through the roof, and we'd just closed a Series A funding round that would fuel the next phase of growth. I was talking with Sarah Martinez about potential improvements to the user interface when I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Marcus was standing near the bar with Bradley and a woman I didn't recognize, elegant, well-dressed, with the kind of confidence that suggested she was used to being the smartest person in the room. "The patents are going to be the real gold mine," Bradley was saying. "Once we have everything locked down legally, we'll have a monopoly on this technology for the next 20 years. The woman nodded. "My cousin Jessica has been handling intellectual property law for tech companies in Silicon Valley. She could help expedite the process." Marcus raised his glass. "To the future of TechFlow, and to making sure we own every piece of it." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December weather. Patents. They were talking about patenting APIs, my creation, my mathematical breakthrough, my countless hours of development and refinement, and they were discussing it as if I wasn't even part of the equation. The next morning, I sent Marcus an email requesting a meeting to discuss the patent applications. His response was polite but evasive. "Let's talk after the holidays. Enjoy your break, Liza." But I couldn't enjoy anything. I spent the entire 2-week holiday break researching patent law, consulting with attorneys, and documenting every aspect of API's development. What I discovered was both reassuring and terrifying. The good news was that as the sole inventor of the core mathematical framework and the primary developer of the system, I had strong legal grounds for claiming ownership of the intellectual property. The bad news was that TechFlow's employee agreements included broad language about company ownership of any work-related innovations. However, there was a crucial detail that everyone seemed to have overlooked. I had developed the initial breakthrough and filed preliminary documentation for APIs before signing TechFlow's employment agreement. The timestamp on my original code commits proved that the fundamental innovation predated my employment contract by several days. When I finally met with Marcus in early January, I laid out my position clearly and professionally. I wasn't trying to hurt the company, I wanted TechFlow to succeed, but I also wanted formal recognition as the inventor of APIs and a fair stake in the intellectual property that was driving the company's success. Marcus listened patiently, nodding at all the right moments. When I finished, he smiled and said, "Liza, you're absolutely right. Let me talk to our legal team and figure out the best way to handle this. You've built something incredible, and you deserve credit for it." I left that meeting feeling optimistic. Marcus had always been fair, always been supportive of my work. I trusted him to do the right thing. That trust was about to be shattered in the most devastating way possible. 2 weeks later, Marcus called an all-hands meeting. The entire company gathered in the main conference room, maybe 25 people by then. Marcus stood at the front with an expression I'd never seen before. Serious, almost somber. "I have some important news to share," he began. "As TechFlow continues to grow, we need to make sure we have the right leadership structure in place. Effective immediately, I'm bringing in someone with deep expertise in our core technology to oversee all technical operations." He gestured toward the back of the room, where a young woman was standing. She was maybe 28, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I'd like everyone to meet Jessica Whitmore. Jessica has an extensive background in software development and business intelligence systems. She'll be joining us as our new Chief Technology Officer. The room was silent. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Jessica Whitmore. The cousin Bradley's wife had mentioned at the Christmas party, the intellectual property lawyer who was supposedly helping with patents. Marcus continued, as part of this transition, we'll be restructuring some of our technical teams. Liza, I'd like to see you in my office after the meeting. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I barely heard the rest of his presentation. My mind was racing, trying to process what was happening. Jessica Whitmore wasn't just taking over as CTO. She was taking over my role, my project, my life's work. The meeting ended, and people began filing out. A few colleagues shot me sympathetic looks, but no one said anything. What was there to say? In Marcus's office, the mask finally came off. Liza, I want you to know this isn't personal, he began, not bothering to sit down. But Jessica brings a level of strategic thinking and business acumen that we need at this stage of growth. Strategic thinking? I couldn't keep the anger out of my voice. Marcus, I created APIs. Every line of code, every mathematical formula, every breakthrough that made this company possible, that was me. And we're grateful for your contributions, he replied smoothly. But intellectual property belongs to the company. You signed an agreement when you joined TechFlow. The core innovation predates my employment here. I have documentation that shows you were working on company-related projects before you were officially hired. Marcus's voice had turned cold. That could be seen as a breach of your previous employment agreement with Microsoft. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. If I pushed the patent issue, he'd claim I had stolen intellectual property from Microsoft to create APIs. It was ridiculous. I'd left Microsoft months before developing the breakthrough, but it would be expensive and time-consuming to prove in court. What exactly are you offering? I asked. Jessica will be taking over technical leadership of the APIs project. We'd like you to stay on as a senior engineer, reporting to her. Your salary will remain the same, and you'll continue to play an important role in the development process. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. He wanted me to work under his wife's cousin, developing my own creation while they took credit for everything I'd built. And if I refuse? Marcus shrugged. Then we'll have to part ways. I'll provide excellent references, of course. You're a talented engineer, Liza. You'll land somewhere good. The dismissal was clear. Accept the demotion or leave the company entirely. Either way, Marcus would own APIs, and Jessica Whitmore would get credit for my work. I thought about my mortgage, my student loans, my elderly parents who were depending on my financial support. I thought about the 3 years I'd spent building TechFlow, the relationships I'd formed, the future I'd imagined. I need some time to think about this, I said finally. Of course, take the weekend, but I'll need an answer by Monday. I walked out of that office in a daze. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, was being taken away from me by someone who probably couldn't even explain how APIs functioned. But as I sat in my car in the parking garage, something shifted inside me. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, calculating anger. Marcus thought he held all the cards. He thought he could steal my work and get away with it because he had lawyers and money and power. He was about to learn that he'd made a critical error in judgment. Because while Marcus owned the company, and while Jessica Whitmore might have the title, there was one thing they couldn't take away from me. I knew exactly how APIs really worked. More importantly, I knew how to make it stop working. The patent documentation I'd been preparing wasn't just about protecting my intellectual property, it was about protecting the future. And that future was about to take a very different direction than Marcus Blackwood had planned. As I drove home that evening, I was already formulating a plan. It would take time, patience, and careful execution. But Marcus had given me the perfect motivation. He'd shown me exactly what kind of person he really was. The war for APIs was about to begin, and Marcus had just made the mistake of underestimating his opponent. I had created something revolutionary. Now I was going to show him just how revolutionary it could be when it was used against him. That weekend felt like the longest of my life. I spent Saturday morning at my kitchen table, surrounded by printed emails, code documentation, and legal research I'd compiled over the past month. My apartment in Capitol Hill had never felt smaller, every surface covered with evidence of what I'd built and what was being stolen from me. Sunday afternoon, I made a decision that would change everything. I called my former colleague from Microsoft, Trevor Walsh, who'd left 2 years earlier to start his own intellectual property law firm in Portland. Liza, it's been ages. How's the startup life treating you? Trevor, I need legal advice. This isn't a social call. His tone shifted immediately. What's going on? I spent the next hour explaining the situation: APIs, the patent issues, Marcus's ultimatum, and Jessica Whitmore's sudden appearance. Trevor listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification on technical details or timeline specifics. Here's the situation, he said finally. You have a stronger case than you think, but it's going to be expensive and time-consuming to fight. More importantly, if you're planning to stay at TechFlow, any legal action would make your position there untenable. What if I wasn't planning to stay? There was a pause. Then we need to talk about offensive strategy rather than defensive. But Liza, that's a much riskier path. Are you sure you want to go down that road? Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that matched my mood perfectly. I walked into TechFlow's offices at exactly 9 a.m., wearing my best professional outfit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained documents I hoped I'd never have to use. Marcus was waiting for me in his office, coffee already cold on his desk. Jessica Whitmore sat in one of the chairs across from him, scrolling through something on her tablet with the casual confidence of someone who'd already won. Liza, good morning. I trust you had time to consider our discussion. I sat down in the remaining chair, opened my portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I've prepared my response. Marcus leaned forward expectantly. Jessica looked up from her tablet for the first time, studying me with pale blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. I'll accept the position as senior engineer under Jessica's leadership, I said, placing the paper on Marcus's desk. These are my conditions. Marcus picked up the document and scanned it quickly. His expression shifted from relief to confusion to something approaching anger. A 40% salary increase, equity participation, formal credit as the original inventor of APIs? He looked up at me sharply. Liza, we're offering you the opportunity to keep your job. This isn't a negotiation. Actually, it is. I kept my voice level professional. I'm the only person who fully understands how APIs functions at the mathematical level. The core algorithms are undocumented because they exist primarily in my head. If you want me to transfer that knowledge to Jessica and ensure a smooth transition, these are my terms. Jessica spoke for the first time. Marcus, perhaps we should consider. No. His voice was final. Liza, I'm disappointed. I thought you understood the bigger picture here. TechFlow is growing beyond what any single person can manage. We need leadership that can scale with our success. Leadership that shares your wife's maiden name, you mean? The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus's face flushed red, and Jessica's perfectly composed expression cracked slightly. That's completely inappropriate, Marcus said. Jessica's qualifications speak for themselves. Do they? Because I've spent the weekend researching her background. MBA from Northwestern, 3 years at a mid-tier consulting firm, and 18 months at a startup that folded. No direct software development experience, no publications in machine learning or business intelligence, and certainly no experience with adaptive algorithmic systems. Jessica's composure returned. Mr. Blackwood, perhaps I should handle this discussion. Liza, I understand you're feeling territorial about your work. That's natural. But what matters now is the company's future, not individual ego. The condescension in her voice was perfectly calibrated, just subtle enough to maintain professional decorum while making it clear she considered me beneath her notice. You're right, I said, standing up. The company's future is what matters, and TechFlow's future depends entirely on APIs continuing to function correctly. I hope you understand the system well enough to maintain it. Marcus stood as well. Liza, if you're threatening to sabotage, I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply pointing out that complex systems require deep understanding to maintain. I'm sure Jessica will figure it out eventually. I walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Marcus? You might want to check your employment contracts more carefully, especially the sections about intellectual property developed before the start of employment. I'll be cleaning out my desk now. The next 30 minutes were surreal. Packing 3 years of work into cardboard boxes while my former colleagues watched with mixtures of sympathy and confusion. Sarah Martinez helped me carry equipment to my car, whispering apologies and promises to stay in touch. Jake Thompson slipped me a note with his personal email and the message, This is wrong and everyone knows it, but it was Emma Rodriguez who provided the most valuable information as I loaded the last box into my trunk. Liza, there's something you should know. Jessica isn't just Marcus's wife's cousin. She's also Bradley Peterson's girlfriend. They've been planning this transition for months. The pieces clicked into place. Bradley's sudden appearance as CTO, his immediate criticism of my work, the Christmas party conversation about patents. This wasn't a business decision. It was a coordinated effort to push me out while claiming ownership of my creation. Emma, do me a favor. Document everything over the next few weeks. System performance, client feedback, any technical issues that come up. Keep detailed records. She nodded. What are you going to do? I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for. 3 days later, I was sitting in Trevor Walsh's Portland office, signing papers that would change the trajectory of my life. The intellectual property filing was comprehensive, detailed documentation of every aspect of API's development, complete mathematical proofs, code repositories with time-stamped commits, and evidence that the core innovation predated my TechFlow employment. This is solid work, Trevor said, reviewing the final documents, but filing is just the beginning. TechFlow will challenge this immediately, and they have deeper pockets than you do. Let them challenge it. I have something they don't, which is time. APIs isn't just software, it's a continuously learning system. Without proper maintenance and updates, it'll start degrading within weeks. Jessica Whitmore can manage the user interface and handle client meetings, but she can't maintain the mathematical foundation of something she doesn't understand. Trevor raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerously close to sabotage. Not sabotage. Natural entropy. Complex systems degrade without expert maintenance. That's not my fault. That's physics. The patent application was filed on Thursday, February 3, 2022. By Friday afternoon, I received a call from Marcus's attorney, demanding I withdraw the filing and threatening legal action for breach of contract. I referred them to Trevor and didn't take any more calls from TechFlow. Instead, I focused on my new project, founding my own company. Chen Dynamics launched quietly in March 2022, operating out of a co-working space in Fremont. My initial plan was modest: provide consulting services to companies that needed expertise in business intelligence and process optimization. I had enough savings to survive for 6 months, maybe 8 if I was careful. But by April, something interesting started happening. Companies that had been on TechFlow's waiting list began reaching out to me directly. Word was spreading through industry networks that APIs was experiencing technical difficulties, and potential clients were looking for alternatives. The first major breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Northwest Freight, TechFlow's flagship client, contacted me through a mutual connection at a supply chain conference. Ms. Chen, we've been experiencing some unusual issues with our TechFlow implementation, explained Richard Nakamura, their operations director. The system that was working so well last year seems to be making increasingly poor optimization recommendations. Our efficiency gains have completely eroded. I scheduled a consultation meeting, officially just to provide general advice about business intelligence systems. Unofficially, I was curious to see how badly APIs was degrading under Jessica's management. The answer was worse than I'd expected. The system was still functional at a basic level, but the adaptive learning algorithms had been corrupted by improper updates. Jessica had attempted to improve the mathematical model by incorporating standard machine learning techniques that were fundamentally incompatible with API's architecture. Mr. Nakamura, I can't comment on TechFlow's specific implementation, but I can tell you that the type of problems you're describing are typically caused by algorithmic interference when someone tries to modify a complex system without understanding how its components interact. Can it be fixed? Not easily. The corruption runs deep. You'd essentially need to rebuild the mathematical foundation from scratch. I paused, letting that sink in. Or you'd need to implement a completely different system that was designed correctly from the beginning. 3 weeks later, Northwest Freight became Chen Dynamics' first major client. The contract was worth more than my entire annual salary at TechFlow. By June, I had 4 full-time employees and a client list that was growing faster than I could handle. Sarah Martinez joined us as head of product development after Jessica fired her for failing to adapt to new leadership paradigms. Jake Thompson followed 2 weeks later along with David Kim. The irony wasn't lost on me. TechFlow was hemorrhaging talent while Chen Dynamics was becoming everything TechFlow had promised to be. But the real satisfaction came from watching TechFlow's public struggles. Industry publications that had once praised APIs as revolutionary were now running articles about the dangers of overpromising in business intelligence. Client complaints were becoming public, with companies openly discussing TechFlow's declining performance at industry conferences. Marcus tried to salvage the situation by hiring expensive consultants and bringing in new developers, but the fundamental problem remained. Jessica Whitmore didn't understand the system she was trying to manage, and her attempts to fix it were making everything worse. In July, I received an unexpected phone call. "Liza, it's Marcus, we need to talk." I'd been expecting this call for weeks. "What can I do for you, Marcus?" "You know exactly what you can do. This vendetta needs to end. You're destroying the company we built together." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm running my own business, serving clients who need reliable business intelligence solutions. If that's affecting TechFlow, perhaps you should examine why your system isn't meeting client needs." "Don't play games with me. You designed APIs to fail without your involvement. That's sabotage, and my lawyers are preparing a case that will— Marcus, let me stop you right there. I didn't design anything to fail. I designed a complex system that requires expert maintenance. When you replaced me with someone who lacks the necessary expertise, degradation was inevitable. That's not sabotage, that's the natural consequence of your decision." There was a long silence. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was different, less angry, more desperate. "What do you want, Liza? Money? Equity? A formal apology? Just tell me what it'll take to fix this. I want you to acknowledge that APIs was my creation. I want the patents transferred to my name, and I want Jessica Whitmore removed from any involvement in technical decisions." "That's impossible. The patents represent millions of dollars in value, and Jessica is family." "Then we don't have anything to discuss." I hung up and immediately called Trevor to report the conversation. If Marcus was preparing legal action, I wanted to be ready. But the next move didn't come from Marcus's lawyers. It came from TechFlow's investors. In August, I received a call from Patricia Hendricks, the managing partner at Meridian Capital, the venture capital firm that had led TechFlow's Series A funding round. "Ms. Chen, I'd like to meet with you to discuss a business opportunity. Are you available for lunch this week?" We met at a downtown restaurant, and Patricia got straight to the point. Meridian Capital has significant concerns about TechFlow's technical direction. The company we invested in 18 months ago was built around groundbreaking technology. The company we're monitoring today appears to be struggling with basic implementation. I chose my words carefully. I can't comment on TechFlow's specific situation, but I can tell you that business intelligence systems require deep expertise to maintain and develop. Expertise that you possess, among others, yes. Patricia leaned forward. "What would it take for you to return to TechFlow in a leadership role?" The offer was tempting, not because I wanted to return, but because it confirmed what I'd suspected. TechFlow was in serious trouble, and the investors were looking for solutions. "Ms. Hendricks, I appreciate the offer, but I'm committed to building Chen Dynamics. However, I might be interested in discussing other arrangements, such as Meridian Capital could acquire the API's patents from me and license the technology to TechFlow under proper technical supervision. Or you could invest in Chen Dynamics and help us scale to serve TechFlow's current client base." Patricia smiled. "Those are interesting options. Let me discuss them with my partners." 2 weeks later, Meridian Capital made an offer that exceeded my wildest expectations. They wanted to acquire a 40% stake in Chen Dynamics for $12 million, with the option to purchase the API's patents for an additional $15 million. The deal would make me financially independent while giving me the resources to build Chen Dynamics into a major player in the business intelligence market. More importantly, it would give me complete control over the technology I'd created. But before I could accept, I received one final call from Marcus. "Liza, I know about the Meridian deal. If you take their money, you'll destroy TechFlow completely. 40 people will lose their jobs. Companies that depend on our system will be left stranded. Is your revenge really worth all that collateral damage?" For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a moment of doubt. Marcus was right about the collateral damage. TechFlow's employees were good people who didn't deserve to suffer because of their CEO's poor decisions. "Marcus, I never wanted to destroy TechFlow. I wanted to be fairly compensated for my work and properly credited for my innovations. You chose to replace me with your wife's cousin instead of treating me with basic professional respect. I made mistakes, I admit that. But it's not too late to fix this. Come back, Liza. Full partnership, equity participation, complete control over technical development. We can make this right. It was everything I'd originally wanted: partnership, recognition, control over my creation. But it was 18 months too late. I'm sorry, Marcus. You had your chance to do the right thing. Now it's my turn to build something better. The next morning, I signed the partnership agreement with Meridian Capital. Chen Dynamics was officially on track to become TechFlow's biggest competitor, powered by the very technology Marcus had tried to steal from me. But the story was far from over. In fact, the most dramatic chapter was just beginning. September 2022 brought news that changed everything. The United States Patent and Trademark Office officially granted my patent application for the Adaptive Process Intelligence System. Patent number US 11,800-1082 was now legally mine, covering the mathematical framework, algorithmic approach, and implementation methodology that powered not just Chen Dynamics, but the entire foundation of TechFlow's business model. I was reviewing the official documentation in my new corner office when Trevor called with an update that made my blood run cold. "Liza, TechFlow's legal team just filed a massive lawsuit. They're claiming the patent rightfully belongs to the company under your employment agreement, and they're seeking damages for what they're calling systematic theft of trade secrets and deliberate sabotage of proprietary systems." I stared out at the Seattle skyline, watching storm clouds gather over Elliott Bay. How massive are we talking? 50 million in damages, plus an injunction that would shut down Chen Dynamics entirely. They're also demanding ownership of all client contracts you've signed since leaving TechFlow. The lawsuit was clearly a desperation move, but it was also dangerous. Even if I ultimately won, the legal battle could drain my resources and destroy the momentum I'd built over the past 8 months. "Trevor, what are our chances if this goes to trial?" "Honestly, 60-40 in our favor, maybe 70-30 if we get the right judge. But trials are expensive and unpredictable. TechFlow knows they can't win on the merits, so they're trying to bleed you dry with legal fees." That afternoon, I called an emergency meeting with my core team. Sarah Martinez, Jake Thompson, David Kim, and Emma Rodriguez gathered in our conference room, along with Patricia Hendricks from Meridian Capital, who'd flown up from San Francisco specifically for this discussion. "Here's the situation," I began, placing copies of the lawsuit on the table. "TechFlow is trying to destroy us through litigation. They know they can't compete on technology, so they're attempting to tie us up in court until we run out of money." Patricia leaned forward. "What kind of timeline are we looking at? 18 months minimum, possibly 3 years if they drag it through appeals. During that time, we'll be spending millions on legal fees while operating under the cloud of potential shutdown." The room fell silent. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "What if we settle? Give them something to make this go away." "They don't want something," I replied. "They want everything." Marcus made that clear when he demanded the patents, removal of Jessica from technical decisions, and basically a complete surrender of everything we've built. Jake looked confused. "But didn't Marcus offer you a partnership deal just a few weeks ago? Why the sudden shift to nuclear warfare?" Emma had been quietly scrolling through her phone during the discussion. Now she looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Because TechFlow is about to go out of business," she said quietly. "My contact at their accounting firm just texted me. They're projecting a complete loss of revenue within 6 months if current trends continue." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "How complete are we talking?" 17 of their 23 major clients have either terminated their contracts or indicated they won't renew. The ones remaining are actively shopping for alternatives. TechFlow's monthly recurring revenue has dropped from 2.8 million to less than 400,000 in the past 4 months. The numbers were staggering. TechFlow wasn't just struggling, they were in a death spiral. "There's more," Emma continued. "Jessica Whitmore hired a team of consultants from McKinsey to optimize the technical architecture. They've been trying to reverse engineer APIs from scratch, but their attempts to rebuild the system have failed completely. The clients who haven't left yet are reporting system failures, data corruption, and recommendations that are actually making their operations less efficient." I felt a mixture of satisfaction and genuine concern. I'd wanted TechFlow to acknowledge what I'd contributed to their success, but I'd never intended to destroy the company entirely. "What about their employees?" I asked. "Mass layoffs started last week. They've cut the engineering team from 15 people to 4. Marcus is personally handling sales calls because they can't afford their business development staff." Patricia was taking notes on her tablet. "This changes our strategic position significantly. If TechFlow is truly on the verge of bankruptcy, this lawsuit might be their last-ditch attempt to seize assets that could save the company. Or it might be Marcus's way of ensuring that if he can't have APIs, nobody can, David added grimly. That evening, I drove to my parents' house in Redmond for our weekly dinner. My mother, Helen Chen, had been a software engineer at Boeing for 30 years before retiring, and my father, Robert, had run his own small business consulting firm. They understood both the technical and business sides of what I was dealing with. "You look exhausted, Liza," my mother said as we sat down to eat. "This lawsuit is taking a toll on you." "It's not just the lawsuit, Mom. It's the whole situation. I created something revolutionary, and now I'm watching it be destroyed by people who don't understand what they're doing." My father set down his chopsticks. What would happen to TechFlow's employees if the company collapsed completely? The question I'd been avoiding. Most of them would probably find new jobs eventually. The tech market is still strong, but some of the older employees, the ones who've been there since the beginning, it would be devastating. And their clients, they'd be forced to find alternative solutions. Some might come to us, but others would probably just abandon business intelligence systems entirely after such a bad experience. My mother studied my face carefully. "You're thinking about settling, aren't you?" I nodded. "Trevor thinks we can win the lawsuit, but at what cost? Even if we prevail, the process will consume years of my life and millions in legal fees. And in the meantime, TechFlow's employees will suffer, their clients will be left in limbo, and the entire business intelligence industry will be tainted by this mess." "What kind of settlement are you considering?" "I don't know yet. Something that acknowledges my ownership of the patents while allowing TechFlow to continue operating. Maybe a licensing agreement that gives them access to API's technology while ensuring I maintain control." My father was quiet for a long moment. "Liza, you're 29 years old. You've built something extraordinary, and you have every right to protect it. But you're also thinking about this like an engineer rather than a businesswoman." "What do you mean?" "You're trying to solve the technical problem, how to keep TechFlow alive while maintaining your rights. But the real question is strategic. What outcome serves your long-term interests best?" Over the weekend, I found myself driving around Seattle, thinking about my father's words. What did I really want from this situation? The answer crystallized on Sunday morning as I sat in a coffee shop in Pike Place Market, watching tourists navigate the crowded market. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition, fair compensation, and the opportunity to build something meaningful with the technology I'd created. But I also wanted the satisfaction of knowing that my work had made a difference in the world, even if that meant allowing TechFlow to survive. Monday morning, I called Marcus directly. "We need to talk," I said when he answered. "Not through lawyers, not through intermediaries, just you and me, one conversation to see if there's a way out of this mess that doesn't destroy both our companies." There was a long pause. "I'm listening." Neutral ground. The Starbucks in the lobby of the Columbia Tower. 1 hour. Marcus was already there when I arrived, looking older than his 37 years. The confident entrepreneur I'd first met had been replaced by someone who clearly hadn't been sleeping well. "You look terrible," I said, sitting down across from him. "Thanks, you look like success agrees with you." We sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd once worked toward the same goals, now on opposite sides of a war that was destroying both our companies. "Marcus, I'm going to be direct. Your lawsuit is a bluff. You don't have the resources to sustain a lengthy legal battle, and we both know the patents rightfully belong to me. This is your last roll of the dice before TechFlow collapses entirely." He started to object, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. Despite everything that's happened, I don't want to see TechFlow die. You've got good people working there, clients who depend on your services, and a business model that could still work if it were managed properly. What are you proposing?" "A partnership. Not employment, not acquisition. A genuine partnership between Chen Dynamics and TechFlow. I'll license API's technology to TechFlow at a reasonable rate, provide technical support to ensure proper implementation, and help you rebuild your client base. In exchange, you drop the lawsuit, acknowledge my patent ownership publicly, and give me a formal equity stake in TechFlow." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "And Jessica gets reassigned to business development or client relations, something that plays to her actual strengths. Technical leadership goes to someone who understands the technology." "She won't accept that. Then she's welcome to find employment elsewhere." "Marcus, API's is dying under her management. Your clients are fleeing because the system they loved 18 months ago has been corrupted beyond recognition. You can either swallow your pride and fix this, or you can watch everything you built collapse. Marcus stared into his coffee cup for a long time. When he looked up, I saw something I'd never seen before. Defeat. What kind of equity stake are we talking about? 25%, with the option to increase my ownership if TechFlow fails to meet performance targets. I also want a board seat and veto power over all technical decisions. That's substantial. It's fair compensation for saving your company from bankruptcy. Marcus, without this partnership, TechFlow will be dead within 6 months. With it, you have a chance to rebuild and become the company you originally envisioned. He was quiet for another long moment. I need to discuss this with my board and investors. You have 48 hours. After that, I proceed with the assumption that you'd rather see TechFlow burn than admit you made a mistake. As I walked back to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not hope for revenge or vindication, but hope for a future where the technology I'd created could actually fulfill its potential to help businesses operate more efficiently. But I also knew that the next 48 hours would determine whether Marcus Blackwood was capable of making the difficult decisions necessary to save his company, or whether his pride would ultimately destroy everything he'd worked to build. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on Tuesday night. "Liza, it's Marcus. We accept your terms." Marcus's acceptance of my terms should have felt like victory, but as I hung up the phone that Tuesday night, all I felt was exhaustion. The real work was just beginning. The partnership agreement took 3 weeks to negotiate. Marcus's lawyers fought every clause, trying to preserve some semblance of control for TechFlow's existing leadership. My attorney, Trevor Walsh, had flown up from Portland and was staying in a downtown hotel, billing hours that would have made my former self faint. "They're trying to limit your technical authority to advisory capacity only," Trevor explained during one particularly frustrating session. "Essentially, they want your technology and expertise without giving you actual decision-making power." I leaned back in the conference room chair, studying the latest draft of the partnership agreement. Then they haven't learned anything from the past 18 months. Counter with full technical authority over all APIs-related development and implementation. "Liza, that's going to be a non-starter for them. Then they can watch their company die. I'm not interested in being a highly paid consultant who gets blamed when things go wrong but has no authority to prevent problems." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Patricia Hendricks from Meridian Capital called me directly, bypassing both legal teams. "This negotiation has gone off the rails," she said without preamble. "My firm has $40 million invested in TechFlow, and we're watching our investment evaporate while lawyers argue about org charts. Patricia, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I've seen what happens when non-technical people make technical decisions about complex systems. I won't put my name on something that's destined to fail. What if we restructured this as a merger rather than a partnership? Chen Dynamics and TechFlow become subsidiaries of a new holding company, with you as Chief Technology Officer of the combined entity." The idea was intriguing. A merger would give me the control I needed, while allowing Marcus to save face by remaining CEO of the larger organization. Who would run the holding company? You and Marcus would share operational control, with me representing Meridian's interests on the board. Think of it as a fresh start for everyone involved. 2 days later, we had a deal. TechFlow and Chen Dynamics would merge to form Adaptive Intelligence Solutions, with Marcus as CEO, me as CTO and co-founder, and Patricia as chairman of the board. The new company would own the API's patents, employ all staff from both organizations, and honor all existing client contracts. Most importantly for me, Jessica Whitmore would be transitioned to a business development role focused on strategic partnerships, which was corporate speak for being kicked upstairs and kept away from anything technical. The announcement was scheduled for October 15, 2022, but word leaked to the industry press 3 days early. TechCrunch ran a story with the headline, "Patent War Ends in Surprise Merger as TechFlow Founder Teams Up with Former Employee." The article portrayed the situation as a brilliant strategic move by Marcus, completely omitting the fact that his company had been weeks away from bankruptcy. But I didn't care about the media narrative. What mattered was the work ahead. The first order of business was assessing the damage Jessica had inflicted on APIs during her 8 months of technical leadership. I spent my first week back in TechFlow's offices, now our shared headquarters, running diagnostic tests on every client implementation. The results were worse than I'd feared. Of the 6 remaining clients, 4 were running corrupted versions of APIs that were actively degrading their operational efficiency. The other 2 had manually disabled most of the system's adaptive features after experiencing repeated failures. It's like watching someone perform surgery with a hammer, Jake Thompson observed as we reviewed the code changes Jessica's team had made. They identified problems correctly, but their solutions created 10 new problems for every one they fixed. Sarah Martinez was conducting client interviews to understand the full scope of the damage. Her preliminary report painted a grim picture. Universal Logistics is considering legal action for the productivity losses they've experienced. Coastal Manufacturing has already engaged another vendor for their next phase of expansion. Even Northwest Freight, our most loyal client, is questioning whether they want to continue with APIs after their recent problems. I called an all-hands meeting for Monday morning. The entire team, former TechFlow employees, Chen Dynamics staff, and the handful of consultants we'd retained, gathered in the main conference room. For the first time in almost a year, I stood in front of the group as their technical leader. I know many of you have questions about what this merger means for your roles, your projects, and the company's future, I began. Let me be clear, our immediate priority is fixing the damage that's been done to our technology and rebuilding trust with our clients. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, showing client satisfaction scores over the past 18 months. The decline was dramatic and undeniable. This is what happens when complex systems are managed by people who don't understand how they work. Every one of these data points represents a client who trusted us to improve their business operations and instead experienced degraded performance. Several former TechFlow employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They'd watched Jessica make these changes and hadn't been able to prevent them. But here's the good news, I continued, clicking to the next slide. We know exactly what went wrong and we know how to fix it. Over the next 60 days, we're going to rebuild APIs from the ground up for every affected client. Not patches, not workarounds, complete system restoration using the original mathematical framework. Tom Brennan, one of the engineers who'd worked under Jessica, raised his hand. What about the improvements we've made? Some of the modifications were actually beneficial. Tom, I've reviewed every change made to the codebase over the past year. There were 3 modifications that showed genuine improvement. 3 out of 47 major changes. We'll preserve those 3 and eliminate everything else. The room fell silent. 44 changes, representing months of work by multiple teams, were being discarded entirely. I know that sounds harsh, I said, but this isn't about protecting anyone's ego. It's about delivering a product that actually works. Our clients don't care how clever our code is, they care about results. Marcus had been unusually quiet during the presentation. When I finished, he stood up and addressed the room. I want to be clear about something, he said. Liza has complete authority over all technical decisions. If she says we need to rebuild something, we rebuild it. If she says we need to scrap a feature, we scrap it. Questions about technical direction go to her, not to me. It was the first time Marcus had publicly acknowledged my technical leadership since the day he'd hired Jessica to replace me. The gesture meant more than he probably realized. The next 8 weeks were brutal. We were essentially running 2 companies simultaneously, maintaining operations for existing clients while completely rebuilding their systems. I was working 16-hour days, reviewing code, testing implementations, and personally overseeing every client migration. But gradually, things began to improve. Universal Logistics was the first to see restored performance, with their operational efficiency jumping back to previous levels within a week of the system rebuild. Coastal Manufacturing agreed to extend their contract after seeing preliminary results from our updated implementation. The real test came with Northwest Freight, our most technically sophisticated client. Richard Nakamura had been skeptical about the merger, worried that we were just promising another round of changes that would disrupt their operations. Mr. Nakamura, I understand your concerns, I said during our video conference in December. You've been through 18 months of system instability, and you have every right to be cautious about more modifications. Liza, with all due respect, we were told the previous changes would improve performance too. How do we know this won't be another expensive experiment? I shared my screen, showing real-time performance data from their upgraded system. Because we're not experimenting. We're restoring APIs to its original design specifications, the same framework that delivered the 42% efficiency improvements you experienced in 2021. The data spoke for itself. Within 3 weeks of the migration, Northwest Freight was seeing performance levels that exceeded even their original implementation. More importantly, The system was learning and adapting again, making predictive recommendations that consistently improved their operational workflows. By January 2023, Adaptive Intelligence Solutions had not only retained all of TechFlow's remaining clients, but had signed 12 new contracts. Our revenue was approaching pre-crisis levels, and industry publications were starting to notice our turnaround. But the most satisfying moment came during our Q4 board meeting in February. Patricia Hendricks was reviewing financial projections when she paused and looked directly at me. "Liza, I need to ask you something. When you first proposed this partnership, did you know it would work out this well?" I considered the question carefully. I knew the technology was sound and that proper management could restore client confidence. But honestly, I wasn't sure Marcus and I could work together effectively after everything that had happened. Marcus spoke up from across the conference table. "What changed your mind about working with me?" "You did. When you publicly acknowledged my technical authority in that first all-hands meeting, you proved you were more interested in success than in protecting your ego." "And Jessica?" I glanced at Marcus, wondering how much honesty our rebuilt relationship could handle. Jessica was reassigned to business development, where she's actually quite effective. She's closed 3 major deals in the past 4 months by focusing on client relationships rather than technical implementation. It was true. Once removed from technical responsibilities, Jessica had proven to be an excellent salesperson. Her confidence and communication skills were perfectly suited for business development, and she seemed much happier in her new role. "So everyone won?" Patricia asked. "Everyone who was willing to adapt," I replied. "The people who couldn't accept the new structure found opportunities elsewhere." That included Bradley Peterson, who'd resigned in November after it became clear his role as CTO was redundant with my return. He'd joined a startup in San Francisco, and from what I'd heard was doing well in a role that better matched his skills. The final milestone came in March 2023, when Adaptive Intelligence Solutions received the Business Intelligence Innovation Award from the Pacific Northwest Technology Association. Marcus and I accepted the award together, standing on stage as co-founders of a company that had nearly been destroyed by ego and poor decision-making. But as I looked out at the audience of industry professionals, I wasn't thinking about awards or recognition. I was thinking about the lesson I'd learned over the past 2 years, that sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's proving that you were right all along. TechFlow's employees had kept their jobs, their clients were getting better service than ever, and I had achieved something more valuable than money or recognition. I had built something that mattered, survived an attempt to steal it, and emerged stronger on the other side. Marcus and I still disagreed on plenty of issues, but we'd learned to channel those disagreements into productive debate rather than destructive conflict. Jessica had found a role where she could contribute meaningfully without causing technical chaos, and APIs was finally fulfilling its potential to transform how businesses operated. As we left the awards ceremony that night, Marcus turned to me with a question I'd been expecting for months. "Liza, do you ever regret not just destroying TechFlow when you had the chance? You could have taken your patents, built Chen Dynamics into the market leader, and left us to collapse." I thought about his question as we walked through downtown Seattle, past the building where TechFlow had once occupied the 15th floor, and where Adaptive Intelligence Solutions now occupied 3 full floors. "Marcus, destroying TechFlow would have been easy. Building something better was much harder, but infinitely more satisfying." And as I spoke those words, I realized they were completely true. The CEO had tried to replace me with his wife's cousin. But in the end, I hadn't just survived. I'd transformed both our companies into something neither of us could have built alone. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed. 1 year after the merger, I stood in the gleaming lobby of our new headquarters in Bellevue, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on the Adaptive Intelligence Solutions logo that would soon dominate the building's entrance. The contrast with TechFlow's cramped 15th floor office couldn't have been more stark. Impressive, isn't it? Patricia Hendricks had appeared beside me, coffee in hand, surveying the bustling activity. 18 months ago, we were calculating liquidation values for TechFlow. Now we're planning a second round of expansion. The numbers told the story better than words ever could. Adaptive Intelligence Solutions now employed 127 people across 4 offices, served over 200 clients, and had just closed a Series B funding round that valued the company at $340 million. More importantly, client satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs, with 97% of customers reporting measurable improvements in operational efficiency. But success brought new challenges I hadn't anticipated. The morning's Seattle Times featured an article titled, "The Rise of Liza Chen, From Corporate Outcast to Tech Powerhouse." The journalist had somehow obtained details about my original conflict with Marcus, including Jessica's role in my departure and the patent battle that had nearly destroyed both companies. Ms. Chen's story raises important questions about corporate governance and the treatment of innovators in the tech industry, the article concluded. How many other breakthrough technologies have been compromised by leadership decisions that prioritize personal relationships over technical expertise? I was still processing the article when my assistant knocked on my office door. "Liza, there's a call for you." Someone named Dr. Amanda Foster from Stanford's Graduate School of Business. She says it's about a research study. Dr. Foster's project was fascinating and slightly uncomfortable. She was documenting cases where technical innovators had successfully defended their intellectual property against corporate appropriation, and my story had become a central case study. "What interests me most," she explained during our video call, "is that you chose collaboration over litigation. Most patent disputes in the tech industry end with years of courtroom battles and mutual destruction. Your approach of leveraging ownership to force partnership is almost unprecedented." It wasn't entirely altruistic, I admitted. Destroying TechFlow would have been emotionally satisfying but strategically stupid. The real value of APIs came from helping businesses operate more efficiently, not from winning legal battles. But you did win, in a sense. You now control the technology you created, have equity in a successful company, and achieved recognition for your innovations. How does that feel? How did it feel? The question had been nagging at me for months. The vindication was real. Industry conferences now introduced me as the inventor of APIs and co-founder of Adaptive Intelligence Solutions. Financial security was no longer a concern. I had influence over technical decisions and the respect of my peers, yet something felt incomplete. The answer came during an unexpected encounter 3 weeks later. I was grabbing lunch at a cafe near the University of Washington when I spotted a familiar face at a corner table. Bradley Peterson, Marcus's former CTO, was hunched over a laptop, wearing a wrinkled flannel shirt that suggested his Silicon Valley startup wasn't going as smoothly as planned. "Bradley, what brings you back to Seattle?" He looked up, startled, then managed a rueful smile. "Liza, I should have known I'd run into you eventually. I'm up here for a few meetings with potential investors." I gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Mind if I sit?" I promise not to gloat about how well APIs is performing under proper technical leadership. Ouch, but fair. He closed his laptop and leaned back. "Actually, I owe you an apology. Several apologies, really. This wasn't what I'd expected. Bradley had been one of the primary architects of my removal from TechFlow, working with Jessica to undermine my authority and ultimately supporting my replacement. You don't owe me anything, Bradley. We were on opposite sides of a business conflict. It happens." No, it was more than that. I knew Jessica didn't understand the technical complexities of APIs. Hell, I didn't fully understand them either. But I convinced myself that management skills were more important than technical expertise. He paused, staring into his coffee. "I've spent the past year trying to build something comparable to APIs for my new company. The mathematical framework you developed, it's not just innovative, Liza. It's genius-level work. I had no idea what we were trying to replace you with." The admission was unexpected and oddly satisfying, not because I needed validation, but because it confirmed something I'd suspected. Most of the people involved in my removal had genuinely believed they were making sound business decisions. What about Jessica? How is she handling the transition? Bradley's expression darkened. "That's complicated. She's doing well in business development, from what I hear. But she's also been making some concerning claims about her role in developing APIs." My stomach tightened. What kind of claims? "She's been telling people at industry events that the merger happened because TechFlow needed her business expertise to scale APIs effectively. She's implying that the technical problems were minor compared to the strategic challenges she solved." I felt the familiar surge of anger that I'd thought I'd moved past. After everything, the patent battle, the near bankruptcy of TechFlow, the months of rebuilding corrupted systems, Jessica was rewriting history to position herself as the hero of the story. "Bradley, thank you for telling me. I appreciate the heads up." That evening, I called Marcus from my home office. We'd developed a good working relationship over the past year, but personal conversations were still rare. "Marcus, we need to discuss Jessica's public statements about her role in API's development. I'm hearing reports that she's misrepresenting the merger and her contributions to the technology." There was a long pause. "Liza, Jessica is family. She's also been instrumental in our business development success. I can't exactly forbid her from talking about her work." "I'm not asking you to forbid anything, but when she implies that she co-developed APIs or that the merger was primarily about scaling her strategic insights, she's undermining the intellectual property foundation that our entire company is built on." "What are you proposing?" "A clear public statement about the technical leadership structure at Adaptive Intelligence Solutions, something that acknowledges the roles and contributions of all key personnel without ambiguity." Marcus agreed to draft a statement, but I could hear reluctance in his voice. Family relationships were clearly complicating what should have been a straightforward business decision. The statement that appeared on our company blog 3 days later was diplomatically worded but clear. Adaptive Intelligence Solutions was founded on breakthrough mathematical algorithms developed by CTO and co-founder Liza Chen. The successful integration of TechFlow and Chen Dynamics was made possible by the complementary expertise of our entire leadership team, including CEO Marcus Blackwood's strategic vision and Business Development Director Jessica Whitmore's client relationship management. It wasn't as definitive as I'd hoped, but it established the factual record clearly enough. The real validation came from an unexpected source 2 months later. MIT's Computer Science Department invited me to deliver a keynote address at their annual symposium on artificial intelligence and business applications. The invitation letter specifically mentioned your pioneering work in adaptive process intelligence and your successful navigation of complex intellectual property challenges in the technology sector. Standing in MIT's legendary Kresge Auditorium before 800 graduate students, faculty members, and industry professionals, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this moment. 3 years earlier, I'd been an unknown engineer working in a cramped startup office. Now I was being introduced as one of the most innovative minds in contemporary business intelligence research. But the presentation I delivered wasn't about technical achievements or business success. Instead, I focused on something more fundamental: the responsibility that comes with creating technologies that have the power to transform entire industries. When I developed the mathematical framework for APIs, I told the audience, I was focused on solving technical problems. I wanted to create software that could help businesses operate more efficiently. What I didn't anticipate was that the technology itself would become a weapon in corporate power struggles. I clicked to a slide showing client performance data. The lesson I learned isn't about patents or intellectual property rights. It's about the importance of ensuring that powerful technologies remain in the hands of people who understand both their potential and their limitations. After the presentation, a graduate student approached me with a question that stayed with me long after I'd returned to Seattle. "Professor Chen, what advice would you give to young innovators who want to ensure their work has a positive impact without being exploited by corporate interests?" I've thought about this question many times over the past year. Document everything. Understand your legal rights. And never assume that good intentions will protect you from bad decisions by people in positions of authority. But most importantly, remember that the goal isn't to win battles, it's to make sure your innovations actually benefit the people they were designed to help. 6 months after the MIT presentation, Adaptive Intelligence Solutions announced our acquisition of 2 smaller companies and expansion into European markets. The press release described me as the visionary behind the APIs platform, and detailed our plans to develop next-generation business intelligence tools based on my continued research. But the most meaningful recognition came from a source I'd never expected: the employees who'd worked under Jessica during her tenure as CTO. Tom Brennan, the engineer who'd questioned my decision to scrap most of Jessica's modifications, stopped by my office during the 2nd anniversary of the merger. "Liza, I wanted to thank you for something. When you came back and rebuilt those systems, you could have fired everyone who'd worked on the failed modifications. Hell, most CEOs would have cleaned the house completely." "Tom, those failures weren't your fault. You were following orders from technical leadership. The responsibility belonged to the people making the architectural decisions." "That's exactly my point. You held the right people accountable while protecting the engineers who were just trying to do their jobs. That kind of leadership, it's rare in this industry." As I sat in my office that evening looking out at the Seattle skyline, I realized that Tom had identified something I'd been struggling to articulate. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about having the opportunity to demonstrate what ethical technical leadership looked like. Marcus had replaced me with his wife's cousin, believing that family connections and business credentials mattered more than technical expertise. The market had proven him wrong, but more importantly, the experience had taught all of us valuable lessons about the relationship between innovation, leadership, and corporate responsibility. Jessica had found success in a role that matched her actual skills. Marcus had learned to trust technical expertise over personal relationships, and I had discovered that the most powerful form of revenge was simply building something better than what existed before. The patents I owned were worth millions of dollars, but their real value lay in ensuring that APIs continued to evolve under proper technical guidance. The company we'd built employed over 100 people who were creating tools that genuinely improved business operations for thousands of organizations. 3 years after walking out of TechFlow's offices with my belongings in cardboard boxes, I had achieved something more valuable than personal vindication. I had created a legacy that would outlast any individual career or corporate conflict. The CEO had tried to replace me with his wife's cousin. Instead, he'd accidentally created the conditions for me to build something far more significant than either of us had originally imagined. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply proving that good work, persistence, and ethical leadership will ultimately triumph over short-term thinking and personal favoritism. And that, I realized, was a lesson worth sharing with the next generation of innovators who would face their own battles between creativity and corporate politics. The war for APIs was over. The mission to use technology for positive change was just beginning. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.